Hey you guys, how's it going? My name is MinnitMann. I am a Gangplank main. I'm going to try to get through this video relatively quickly. It is patch 4.18. A lot of preseason changes coming. Worlds just ended. And I'm just looking to really get a discussion going on Gangplank in general. Oh, my face is not looking too good. Just gotta work, sorry. And I wanted to really talk about something a lot of people ask me when I'm streaming, when I'm playing, when I'm adding people. They just ask me, hey, you think GP needs buffs? And I say, kinda. He needs changes, and buffs are mainly the end game. But at the end of the day, I don't think he needs massive ones. I don't think he needs some world-ending buff. I think he just needs a few things changed, and I would like to see a lot of other things changed. Now, mainly, I just wanted to go through what I think should happen, what I think could happen right away, and other differences. I'm actually going to upload a Google Doc with all my things, all my ideas. I just jotted them down. I said, well, maybe I should just jot these out for people to see. In case you don't know who I am, I stream Gangplank a lot. I'm currently ranked as the #1 GPNA. Let me actually pull this up real quick. I don't take much stock in that. It's on low skill. And I'm not going to say I'm the best Gangplank player in the world. I'm not even going to pretend to make that claim. I lose a lot. I'm still Diamond 5. I've been here for hundreds of games. And take this for what you will. But I have played a shit ton of GP games in my match history. You can take a look. I'm getting close to 800, about 750, 741 exactly at the time of this video. So take my build for what you will. Take my opinion for what you will. But I just offer this as somebody who's played a lot of Gangplank. I consider myself an enthusiast with the champion. I love playing him. I'm trying to cosplay him for fuck's sake. I'm growing this beard out so I can head to PAX East in the future. Good luck with that. I gotta get some more meat on these bones here, but that's fine. Let's worry about it later. Okay. So what I'm going to go through first is the main thing I hear and I say when I talk to people about Gangplank. So let's just go through those options first. Why is there this bar in the middle? Okay, it's gone now. Okay, so this is a Google Doc. I'm going to upload it down in the description down below, and I'm going to upload this on Reddit, so you guys can feel free to check it out yourselves. I might edit it in the future, don't know. But for now, just want to go through the changes, and mainly, let's just go with the first question. First question. Does GP need changes? I think the answer is emphatically yes. He needs changes. Now, the most people I talk to when I talk to about what's your opinion on GP? What do you think about GP? High elo players, low elo players, people just sticking around in normals, people just playing in ranked, people trying to do well in ranked. I talk to a lot of top level GP players, King Fat Plank. I got a small thing going on with iJoker, but the translation was really bad. Merc Squad's a high elo player. Zippo Tech from EU West, he's a high elo player. And the consensus is usually that GP is very fun for people who play him. GP does need buffs. Everybody usually just thinks, yes, he needs changes. A lot of people think he's useless for obvious reasons because he's not played in LCS, God forbid. Think that the passive sucks, doesn't scale. I think that's correct. How do you build him? Like, what do you do? Does this work? He doesn't really have any cohesion. This is something I actually talked to with a lot about with other GP mains, is that his kit isn't cohesive. And this is the thing that Riot says, too, in that all his skills might be good in of themselves, but there's not a whole lot of synergy between them. There's not a whole lot of working in between the skills. And the biggest sentiment I see from high elo players and people who play a lot of ranked and people that know GP and people that play this game a lot is that Gangplank is meh. He's not great at any one thing. He's a jack of all trades, master of none type champion that really doesn't make plays and doesn't excite you outside of the usual haha, I'm a pirate, crits, oranges, gold, blah blah blah. Oh, I'm a fucking pirate. There's not a lot of excitement out of the tropiness that comes with the champion. And I would agree. That is the main thing that I think needs to be changed. So this is what I think about all those points. I think Gangplank is super fun. There's no debate in there from my end. I think Gangplank needs small changes. He doesn't just want... You could have a lot of changes on GP, but the things he needs are small changes. Big buffs would be too much, because I think GP's skills are very binary, and that if you make his Q too overpowered, his W too overpowered, or his ult too overpowered, then they become just a nuisance. It's similar to Nunu in that the utility his abilities provide is overbearing when they're a little too overbalanced. It's a slippery slope between balanced and not balanced when it comes to GP's abilities, naturally. The passive needs a major change. I mainly think when people say the passive sucks, they're right. It is almost worthless past mid-game. The damage is not good, the slow is not good, and everything pretty much goes out the window compared to a lot of other champions' passives. Personally, I look at other champions like Yasuo and I say, what the hell, when I see the passives that are provided to champions these days. But that's beside the point. GP's passive is mediocre at best. Good early game, mediocre mid game, worthless late game. It is good for proccing slow effects and things of the like, but aside from that, it's not that great, especially when it comes to the actual raw stat portion. I think when it comes to building GP, I think you should leave his versatility alone, in that I hate when Riot balances a champion but then homogenizes the build. When they make somebody, you have to build this way, we are not letting you build this way, do not do this, do not do that, build the way we want. While that might be better for balance, I don't think it's better for build versatility. There are very few champions in this game that can build the way a Gangplank can build, a Kayle can build, an older Jax can build. Just the way these champions, like Nid now, is I think viable as an AD Bruiser still, but she's also AP viable with the way Riot changed her. There are very few champions who can build the way these champions can. They can build damage, they can build AP, AD, Armor Pen, Magic Pen, CDR, Tankiness, Crit. Very few champions scale the way GP scales. Very few champions can build the versatile builds that he can. I don't want to see this change. I want to see the changes not just remove aspects of GP's build. I want to see them either add to it or leave them alone. I don't want them to remove the scaling on W. I think it's legitimate scaling 1.0 and things along that line. Please, Riot, if anybody at the game development thing is watching this, please do not homogenize his builds. If you're going to take away portions of his kit, give him other ways to use those stats that you took away from his kit. His kit can be made cohesive by doing the following: replacing his E, making his passive a more interactive passive, I'll get to that later, and rebalancing his cooldowns and scaling just a bit. Now, the cooldowns are debatable, but when it comes to just replacing his E with a more active ability and replacing his passive, or just buffing it, to the point where it is changed, where it is interactive with his other abilities, is the main component here. I think the passive, you could do something really special to it. I think you could pretty much replace the E because it's a passive ability, and I think there's a lot of things you could do outside of buffing his Q, W, or ultimate, because those are the most iconic spells. Spells, not spills. Those are the most iconic abilities that come with Gangplank's kit. When people think Gangplank, they think, I orange to heal myself, I poke with Q and get crits, and I drop down a big ol' ult cannonball field. Now, the cannonball field, the ultimate, has been changed for the better recently with the removal of the RNG aspect, so I like that a lot. The Q and the W, remove Scurvy, Parlay, are very iconic and very good spells in of themselves. I think small changes could be made to both in order to buff Gangplank, but they do not need major changes. They work very well for what they do. They just need small fixes rather than large changes. I hate to agree about the last point, which is the fact that GP just feels meh if you play him. He just feels lackluster, and I'll even agree to this to an extent. There's just times when I feel like he's very boring, and he's very passive in terms of what you do during a game. When you think of GP, you don't think of big plays like a Lee Sin or an Aurelia. You don't think of, oh my god, what are we going to do about the GP? You just think he's kind of there, and he does what he does, and there's not a lot of reason to be for or against it as an opposing player or as somebody playing Gangplank. There's not a lot of excitement that comes with playing Gangplank outside of how you like him as a champion. I love him as a champion. I love the pirate design, the gun in hand, the sword in hand, let's get in and brawl, the laughing. I love all that, but that's a design thing of the character. That's not a design thing of the kit. The kit is boring. The kit is boring, and I will agree with that wholeheartedly, because it's just about accumulating stats like crits or AP from the build and just using them, and that's not a fun thing. You gotta have active abilities in this day and age of this game, because we have so many interesting characters. Azir, Yasuo, Braum, just like there's all these characters, and I could go on endlessly. Lee Sin, just all these characters that have fun, exciting kits to use, and GP is just he's in the back here. New Scion, just these characters are exciting, and I want to see that be part of new GP. I'll try to move through this as quickly as I could. Here's what I think Riot should do in order to buff Gangplank without overly buffing him or changing him for the worse. These are changes I think that can be completed relatively quickly. They're not very, I don't think, technologically intensive. I do a little bit of coding, but I can't even pretend to know what Riot's codebase is or how long it would take for changes to implement. But I do know that these changes that I have listed in this section are the ones I would like to see Riot make the most. These are the ones I would love to see implemented quickly, would love to see outside of a rework. I don't think a massive rework is in order. I think there is one down the pipe, but I don't think there is one coming right away. I could be wrong. We'll see. These are the changes that I want to see most out of Riot as a GP main. If I could load up these things tomorrow, I think GP would be a viable champion right away. Currently, I don't think he's viable. I'm going to play him anyway. Anything's viable in solo queue, but I don't think he's viable at a high level right now because he's too like he's janky. He's really weird to use. These would help fix those things. I think rebalancing the mana costs is very important. Basically reducing the cost on Q. It's a bread and butter spell. I don't see how GP should be punished for trying to rank the spell when it's his only way of outputting damage outside of his ultimate. I think if you have a champion with multiple damage abilities, you could say, yes, let's leave the mana cost this high. But when GP only has one spell, and that spell costs 70 mana to use, and you have very mediocre mana pool without items, I do think that the Q is too important to let remain in the current way it is. I think he either needs a change to it or something along those lines. I think the mana cost on E is very counterproductive. It pretty much makes it a one-point wonder or passive-only ability. You can't use it in lane. You will run out of mana very fast. I find it weird that it has the same mana cost as your Q when it's a passive and then it's a movement speed boost. It's just very mediocre in that regard. I think letting GP cast spells is very important, especially his Q, because it's really the only thing he's got. He can't spam his W. It has a long cooldown. He can't spam his E. It's not an active ability. It's not a, I'm going to fight with this ability, like Lee Sin's E or anybody, Darius' E, just anybody who uses an active spell. It's a passive spell, and I think it should be treated as such. I don't think it should have massive mana cost like it does. I think removing the cast times is even more important than rebalancing the mana cost. It's probably the most important thing here. GP is meant to be mobile in that he's fast, he's got poke, he's got range, and he's got the ability to cleanse CC. I don't think a champion like that should literally have a casting time on every single one of his spells. It's very harsh to play this way if you're limited by every spell cast. It's counterproductive of saying, I want to chase this person, but I have to E and stop for half a second before I get the movement speed boost. That doesn't seem right to me. And I know people at Riot have even said so along these lines. I think removing the cast time from two of his abilities would be the best way to do it. This is debatable. I think the best ones that I would like to see changed are his Q and his W. I actually don't agree with people who say the raise morale should have the cast time removed. I think, how should I say, graphically and visually, having GP yell out while shooting his gun in the air and telling his people to get moving is right. I think that's correct. But I think his Q and his W, or just the Q, could have their cast time removed for a very nice small buff. It's a small buff. It's not going to send him over the ledge. It's not going to make him OP out of nowhere. But it would be a very, 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 very good, quickly implemented way to make GP more viable because it gives him the mobility he needs to keep moving while hitting with damage, while escaping CC. It's just counterproductive to be doing those things and stopping. So that's obvious. A lot of people have said that to me. Reduce the cooldowns of Scurvy and Morale in general at high ranks. I find it weird that GP's W at max rank is still a 18-second cooldown. That's insanity when the spell is used for only raw harass and CC removal. Is it too OP if you remove that that cooldown? Possibly. I would love to see Riot refocus the cooldown, maybe make it even higher at max at what rank 1, like 30 seconds at 1 rank and 10 seconds at max rank. I don't know if that would be viable, but I do think the more I play with Gangplank, the more I think his W and his E are just terrible because of their cooldowns. They are extremely long, there are mana costs associated, and they are simply too like, just bad. Outright bad to use in a fashion that they were meant to be used. I can't use his E for mobility because it'll drain me of mana just as fast as using my Q. I can't use his W to sustain as well as I could with another champion's abilities because it's simply too long a cooldown. It is a raw heal. That is what it is. It doesn't give you base health regen alongside it. It's just, hey, I healed myself. But the fact that GP's W is on a 10-second cooldown with 5 ranks and 40% CDR, that's insanity. If you're going to give him a sustain spell, give him the option of using it to sustain. Currently, it's not even viable on that. It's a burst heal, and that's all it is. Champions with low cooldowns like Pantheon or Aurelia or just ranged harass champions won't care, like Ziggs, won't care that you're using it to sustain because with 2 spell casts, before you even get back to 10 seconds on the cooldown, they've already chunked you for all the damage you healed. It is very counterproductive to rank the spell because despite the fact that you're getting a better base heal, the cooldown is not getting better. And I've just tried to use this and it's very bad. I think reducing the cooldown on W when ranked, not at rank 1, would be very good. Same thing goes for E, but that's a very passive spell, so I can't really offer it towards that. Limits build per lay versatility and makes both spells almost traps that are counterproductive to rank up. At the moment, they are both far inferior to ranking Q, and while that's fine, it's not good for build or play diversity. I think a very simple buff would be reverting the nerfs on Gangplank's Q and his passive. Mainly the passive, because the passive used to be very good, but a lot of people complained, oh, it's so OP, the perma slow. But I think that's something you have to introduce back to his kit and just try it out. Possibly it might be too strong, but I think that would be a very good way to really buff GP without doing anything drastic to his kit. You give him another rank or two, possibly 5 ranks of his passive, and just watch how he becomes more viable in the top lane because he becomes a very good champion. He could become more viable in the bot lane because he'd be better at supporting. And there's a lot of things he could do better if he just had better passive, or if he had more gold generation from his Q ranks, because Riot reduced those too. That was a long time ago, I think a couple seasons ago, where maybe season 1, where they reduced the gold generated. Now this is where we kind of get to the fun things. This is where I have ideas for how to change GP and how to make him better naturally by removing, replacing, or doing new things to his passive, his ults, his ability, and everything like that. I'm just going to try to go through these quickly because the video is already droning on a little bit. And you want to really make the passive something special or iconic. I think the passive has so much potential to be a great ability, but here's the main thing. I'll go back to reverting the old nerfs, like I said earlier. Just giving him back more the ability to stack it even higher would be a good buff. But if you're not going to do that, and you're not going to change the ability, or you're not going to really drastically do anything to it, I think completely replacing it is the only other option, because currently it's very bad. It's very mediocre. Mediocre is the word I always go back to when I talk about it. It doesn't serve the purpose it's meant to by mid to late game, because there's so many mobile champions, there's so many champions with items built. They're not going to care about a 21% slow. There, I said it. They're not going to give a crap. A tank's not going to care. An 80 carry's not going to care because they've usually got items by then, and you're not going to really stack the passive that high in the first place late game. So late game, I think it's very bad, so I'm just saying either completely replace it or do something like this to it, where I think a good option to this is the fact that it's called Grog Soaked Blade, buying different kinds of grog that make it better. Make it an upgrade mechanic. Give it something like a hex core mechanic. I think it's the best way to make the passive strong. Give it multiple upgrade options so GP can still have the utility choices and build options. Here's some possible ways to upgrade it. They might be too strong. They're just ideas. I know people can say, what the fuck, that'd be OP. What the fuck, you didn't balance the numbers right. I know. These are concepts. This is concept, concept, concept. This is spitballing. This is brainstorming. This is that sort of thing. Like, you could buy these items in the store to make your grog better. The way they scale, the amount they cost, the scale, the numbers they have, all up for debate, all up for discussion. Feel free to poke holes in my argument all you like. That's what I want. I want to foster a discussion here. Dire grog. Enemies with passive fully stacked on them for 8, 5, 3 seconds, scaling, are stunned for blah 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 so many seconds. Magic grog passive now scales with ability power and deals amplified base magic damage, and now stacks every time an ultimate damage is procced. So you're in the ultimate, every time some damage falls on you, that passive starts stacking on you. That'd be a great way to kind of mix his passive with his ultimate, no? Opportunistic grog. When a killing blow is dealt by the passive, bonus gold is given. This would be great for farming. You can make sure that you let your passive kill enemies. That way you could double up your gold generation. You could hit a creep over here, then you could hit a creep over here, let the passive proc, go over to another creep, hit it a couple times and parlay it, get the gold generation from one and the gold generation from another that just died to the passive. That's a good idea in my book. Corrosive grog. Passive no longer deals damage, but now it shreds armor and magic resist. So you would have the trade-off of I can no longer deal damage with this passive, I can no longer hurt you with this passive, but I can make you more susceptible to my friends, to my teammates and myself. So then you got heavy grog. Passive no longer deals damage, but the slow and the duration of the slow are massively increased. Another way you could make it a more utility-based spell rather than a damage-based spell. Exploitative grog, maybe for every person that has a stack of your passive ticking around you. Say I stack a passive over here, stack jungle ganks. I stack the passive on him, I get one auto attack off on the jungler. Now I've got more crit chance because I just stacked the passive on multiple targets. This could also be very good for maybe on hit items or something like that. Butcher grog. Now it's something like that does a passive of max health damage. This would help jungle Gangplank. This would help like the Dire grog would. These would make other roles possible. Like if I'm playing support Gangplank and I really need hard CC, I would go Dire grog. I would go exploitative. I would go heavy grog. I would want the passive to become a utility spell rather than just a mediocre kind of utility spell. I would turn it into something that could let me play another role. I would turn this passive into a viable build opener, is my main concept here. You can also give this kind of upgrade mechanic to parlay. I think the grog upgrade would be a lot easier and better to implement, but this could also work. You can make gold generation increase on the Q. Like you could go back and buy an item that would like change your ammo for the pistol for the parlay. Double down. You no longer scale with AD, but now all on hit effects like spell blade, like for machine, crit, infinity edge, and lifesteal are now more effective scaling. This might be OP. It's just a spitballing concept here. Like, you no longer scale with AD, so basically your damage is cut in half, but when you have on-hit abilities, they do fantastic. So you would make on-hit Gangplank more viable that way. Like, Wit's End would become twice as good. Like, Nashor's Tooth would become twice as good. Like, Shiv would now deal more damage when it crits. Things such as those. Recyclable ammo. Killing units with Parlay now restores the full mana cost rather than half. If you want to lame it out, farm with your Q, it gives you the ability to do that without going out of mana because you're spamming it. Magic ammo. Now you open up AP Gangplank. You make it so your Q no longer scales with AD, but scales with AP. And now it deals magic damage instead of physical. And now you no longer have to buy Lichbane, but you can, and the build becomes a viable option because you turned your scaling inside out with the use of your passive. And I think that's a very, very smart option. Maybe you can make these upgradable. I don't know. I think these are just very fun ways to make his passive something special. A text message. Don't care. Burst ammo. Parlay no longer applies the passive, but now consumes stacks to deal a burst of bonus damage for each on the enemy. If the passive is fully stacked, also shred your armor and armor. And I butchered that. Just like the Grok. Burst ammo, I think, is kind of one of the ideas I have that I'm kind of proud of. Instead of your Q applying your passive, as in your Q getting the first proc off and then you walk up, now you have to put yourself in melee range in order to get the passive. So you have to take more of a risk to get more of a return. If I get into melee range and I'm playing as a tanky champion or bruiser Gangplank, I want to get the passive off a couple times and then I want to burst them with the Q. It turns the Q into more of an execute or a passive proc ability rather than a I'm going to start stacking the passive with the Q. You get the passive on with your auto attacks, and then you proc it with the Q. It turns your Q into something different completely. It turns your Q into a thing where I want to get a couple procs off on a minion, then Q it for the big burst damage. I want to auto attack more. It makes you want to auto attack more because the synergy with your Q is now amplified. Piercing ammo. Your Q is no longer stopped by spell shields and ignores a percentage of the target's armor. Simple concept, but I think that's nice. Currently, Q is very stoppable late game because it's similar to Vhagar in that if you're against a team full of Banshee's Veil, you can no longer burst because the 1 or 2 Qs you land before the fight begins are completely negated. So I think that's a very good way to help it stop. Now, changes to remove Scurvy. I'm just going to read what I have here. While I don't think GP's W needs many changes, I would very much like to see the C cooldown per rank change to make it much more shorter at max rank. I mentioned this earlier. I just want to see it decrease to the point where GP can actually use it, just max it to gain raw sustain power. It should be able to be used for that. Maybe remove the CC removal aspect. I just think it should be a more sustain-based spell. You should have the option of doing so. While Sustain is willing to play against, I think GP drastically needs such a thing because his current W is much too long a CD to be maxed early. You can do it. I'm still forced to do it in certain matchups, but I don't think it's a good thing to do because it pigeonholes you into a Sustain matchup. And if that's what it needs to be, I think it needs to be that on a viable level. It shouldn't just be a trap spell where, hey, I've got this awesome heal on an 18-second cooldown. It's really counterproductive. Now, this is the main thing that people talk about changing is E. I think that's what Riot's going to do, and I think I'm excited to see what they do for it. But this is the big spell that needs changing. While I can make the argument that is a good spell and makes GP and his team better, it does. It's a decent spell, but it's boring. It's objectively boring and uninteresting in general. I have ideas about what can be done to fix this spell, but I think a replacement is in order since the spell is pretty mediocre in general for the player. It's boring, you fire your gun into the air, you get fast, you get a little bit of AD. You give that to your team, that's nice, it's boring. I'm just going to list some possible things I thought could be an idea here. Make it similar to Kale's E, just giving you, hey, ranged auto attacks for a few seconds. Be a good way to give GP the ability to be a ranged carry. I don't really like this one as much, but I can see why it would work. Natural Tiamat passive active. I kind of like this one. I thought maybe you just give GP a similar to Malphite's W, and that his attacks now deal a percentage of his AD in an AoE around wherever the target he auto attacks. This would make buying Tiamat and Hydra much better and give him build versatility that I mentioned earlier. Another way they could add is maybe you could add the active component triggers, like I said earlier when I had the passive when it came to the which one was it now? Yeah, you consume stacks of your passive. Yes, the burst ammo. You can make the spell the cleave Tiamat passive. Basically, if I have stacks on an enemy and I use this cleave next to them, it'll consume the passive and either deal more damage, apply some CC, and interact with it. That'll make his passive and his E interact more, possibly if it was that type of spell. So that's another option. Make it a gap closer. While boring, I think this is a major thing that GP lacks, and he could make you use of. I'm not going to turn down a gap closer. If a gap closer is what Riot will think will make GP more viable, I'll go along with it. It is boring. I'd like to see them go a different way, more, interesting way, because right now gap closers are really kind of boring to me. It's a major thing that you lack because a lot of other carry bruisers are just so good because they have it. They have it and other champions don't. That's why Darius I don't think is viable at a top level. He doesn't have the mobility. He doesn't have the ability to get his great damage out. Meanwhile, Aurelia, Jarvan, Lee Sin, and Jax can all do that in boatloads. They can all jump in. They've got mobility. They can jump all over the place. They can force fights. GP can't force fights. He cannot do it. Gap Closer would be a way of letting him do it. Is it the best way to do that? I don't think so. I'd love to see what Riot can come up to. They're smarter than me. Well, for the most part. Bomb, Flash, Mobility, Hybrid Ability. This is just something I was spitballing. It could work. It could not. I don't know the difference. It's like a spell that is a mix of Heimerdinger's W and Ziggs's E. Now, Ziggs's E is the Satchel Charge. Heimerdinger's W is the Flash Grenade that stuns now. It's a hard CC. The grenade can also be used with mobility when used on yourself. Possibly called Flash Bomb or something along those lines. It would give GP more ranged harass power while also letting him play defensively in certain situations. Maybe too strong, but then again, I'm throwing out ideas. Use it the same way as Ziggs's bomb. You could use it for harass. You could use it for defensive. You can use it for zoning. You could use it for all that type of stuff. Maybe it'll apply some blind or something along those lines. Passive swap. I think I might have mentioned this earlier, but I think another great idea would be to move Grog's Hook Blade to a main ability passive, one that would get much better with rank and would be key to playing on-hit tanky GP. Maybe it scales with AD, maybe it scales with AP. For whatever reason, you can move the passive to the E. That would be a good idea, I think. Many ideas were had here, but I'll just leave it at what it is now because all the possibilities were a bit overzealous. Yeah, I had a lot of ideas for how you can make the on-hit good, but that's kind of, that's a dream type thing because on-hit abilities are very iffy, and if you could proc on-hit abilities with Q, it could become OB very quickly. So I'm just going to leave that as an option more so than an idea. What also, just taking his passive and putting it on his E as a passive would give you more ability, would give you the power to really go nuts with his passive more. You could make something much more creative. These are some miscellaneous things that I wish would change. I think better stat scaling would be nice, but not crucial. The fact that GP has the best base health in the game is good, but the fact that the game itself is very mediocre, like an early game advantage is not going to win you the game. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten first blood and then fallen off late game because of my health scaling. Health scaling and hour per level could both be buffed. They would be a nice buff to GP because right now his late game is terrible because once AD carries are fed and once team fights and once mages have their items and once everything happens, that low health pool is extremely hurtful. It's why I take health runes now. It's why I like Trinity Force so much is because there's a health component. It's just why health is very crucial to GP. And I think giving him a little bit, like, just don't make him the worst health per level champion in the game, and I'll be happy. Get him up to, you know, the 4th or 5th worst, and I'd be extremely happy there. Maybe it's not in the vision Riot sees. I just think it's something that could easily be changed that would help him out a lot. Because his range is also bad late game also, when everybody has, you know, when you're meeting the AD carry more. And most AD carries that are at a top level right now aren't low range. Kog'Maw, Tristana, Kate, things in those ways. Please fix the Sultan GP taunt animation. Right now his arm does not extend out. I don't like that. It's very sad. And then there is an E bug. I think iJoker has a video of it on his channel where if the enemy was within the radius of your raised morale, they can see you. You are revealed by Fog of War, and I think that's a small buff that's a small bug that does need to be fixed because that's rough for you in the jungle when you're trying to get away. A parlay buff that would be great is to fully refund the spell CD or at least the mana if the target dies mid animation. Right now, if you Q and the target you Q'd dies mid animation, you lose. Your parlay is now on cooldown. The mana cost went through. You didn't get the refund. So right now, it's like if you miss a Q, that can be a death sentence early in lane. If you try to Q a minion too late, it dies. Now your Q is down, the mana cost is gone, and the CD is on. So now the enemy can pretty much engage on you for their free shot for the next 4 seconds. That would be great. That's all I got for now. Thank you guys for reading. I'm going to post this video on my YouTube channel. I'm going to be streaming later tonight. Thank you guys for watching. Thanks for reading. I'm going to post the link to this document up if you want to read it more in depth. Thank you very much. Have a good day.